The rejection ceremony ended with her on her knees in the dirt, her mate's bond severed like a knife through her chest. But the inheritance letter in her trembling hands promised something her pack never could, a place where she belonged. The sacred circle smelled of pine smoke and shame. Leighton Fleming knelt on the packed earth, her knees grinding into small stones that bit through her thin dress. But the physical pain was nothing, nothing compared to the iron band crushing her chest. The bond, her bond, being carved out piece by agonizing piece. I, Dominic Blackthorne, Alpha of the Shadow Moon Pack, sever this bond. His voice was granite, final, the kind of sound that doesn't allow for argument or pleading. Not that she had any pride left to plead with. The gathered pack watched in silence. 300 wolves formed a living wall around the ceremonial grounds, their eyes reflecting firelight, some pitying, most indifferent, a few secretly satisfied. Leighton felt every gaze like brands on her skin. Her Omega nature made her sensitive to emotion, to judgment, and right now, the collective weight of the pack's disappointment threatened to suffocate her. "You are too weak," Dominic continued, pacing before her like a general pronouncing sentence. His tall frame cast a shadow that swallowed her whole. 3 times you've failed to carry a pregnancy to term. 3 times you've shown this pack that you cannot fulfill the most basic purpose of an Omega. Purpose! The word landed like a slap. Her fingers curled into the dirt. She wanted to scream that it wasn't her fault, that the pack doctor said her body wasn't the problem. But what did medical facts matter against centuries of tradition, against an alpha who decided she was defective? "You bring weakness to our bloodline," he said. And she was. The real reason, not her body's supposed failures, but his pride. An alpha's mate should be strong, fertile, unquestionable. She was none of those things in his eyes. The bond snapped. Leighton gasped, her back arching as if struck by lightning. It felt like her chest cavity had been hollowed out, every nerve ending set on fire, and then plunged into ice water. The connection she'd felt since she was 19, that golden thread tying her to Dominic, to the pack, to her place in the world, disintegrated into ash. She collapsed forward, catching herself on trembling arms. A broken sound escaped her throat, half sob, half retch. No one moved to help her. "You have until dawn to leave Shadow Moon territory." Dominic's boots crunched past her, dismissive, done with her. "Take only what you can carry. You are packless now. Omega, no more." The circle dispersed like smoke. Conversations resumed as if they hadn't just witnessed a soul being torn in half. Someone laughed. The sound was obscene. Leighton didn't know how long she stayed there on her hands and knees in the dirt, gasping through the phantom pain. The moon climbed higher, the ceremonial fire crackled and popped. Eventually the cold seeped through her shock, and she forced herself to stand on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Her small cabin, former cabin, sat at the edge of Packlands. She stumbled toward it, the forest path familiar even through tear-blurred vision. Inside, everything looked the same, the quilt her grandmother made still draped across the rocking chair. The herbs she'd hung to dry still dangled from the kitchen beams. But it all felt empty now. Hollow. Like her. She pulled out her battered duffel bag and began mechanically folding clothes. What do you pack when your entire life has been erased? She grabbed practical things. Jeans, sweaters, her grandmother's recipe book, the photo album. Her hands hesitated over the small wooden box on her nightstand. Inside, the dried flowers from her mating ceremony. She should leave them. Burn them. Instead, she shoved the box into the bag's bottom. Even destroyed bonds left scars. Dawn was still hours away when she finished. She sat on the edge of her bed, duffel at her feet. and felt the crushing weight of alone. Where does a rejected Omega go? Rogues rarely survived long without a pack. The bond had been her anchor. Without it, she was a boat cut loose in a storm. Her grandmother's voice whispered through memory. You're stronger than they know, little moon. Stronger than you know. Grandma Iris had died 6 months ago. The funeral had been small. She'd been ancient, her mind soft with dementia those last years, remembered by few. Leighton had inherited nothing but memories, or so she'd thought. The letter had arrived 3 days ago, forwarded from a lawyer's office in a town she'd never heard of. Dear Miss Fleming, regarding the estate of Iris Fleming. A cabin, deep in unclaimed territory, miles from any packlands. A place so remote the lawyer had included GPS coordinates. Her grandmother had owned it for decades, apparently, though she'd never mentioned it. The property was old, the letter said. Rustic, but it was hers. Leighton pulled the letter from her jacket pocket now, the paper soft from repeated folding. The coordinates were marked in her grandmother's spidery handwriting at the bottom, added as a note. When you need to come home, little moon, it's waiting. As if she'd known. The thought sent a shiver down Leighton's spine. Not fear, but something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She shouldered her duffel bag and walked out of the cabin without looking back. The pack was silent, most wolves asleep. She didn't say goodbye. There was no one to say it to. The journey north took 2 days. She hitchhiked when she could, walked when she couldn't, and slept in her wolf form under trees when exhaustion won. The bond's absence was a constant ache, like breathing through broken ribs. Every mile away from Shadow Moon territory should have felt like freedom. It felt like dying. The forest changed as she traveled deeper into wild lands. The trees grew older, taller, their roots thick as her waist. Moss covered everything in emerald velvet. The air tasted different here, cleaner, sharper, touched with something ancient. No pack scent markers, no human development, just wilderness that predated werewolf politics. She almost missed the cabin. It sat in a clearing so perfectly circular it seemed intentional, as if the forest had stepped back to give it space. The structure was small, maybe 4 rooms total, built from dark wood that had weathered to silver gray. The porch sagged slightly. Shutters hung crooked on their hinges. Moss climbed the stone chimney like a living thing, but the windows were intact. The door was solid, and something about it, maybe the way afternoon light slanted through the pines, or the smell of wood smoke still clinging to the air, made Leighton's chest tighten with recognition. She'd been here before. The memory surfaced slowly. She was 6, maybe 7. Her grandmother bringing her to this place during summer. They'd picked wildflowers and made daisy chains. Grandma had told her stories on that porch, tales about wolves who could speak to the moon, about Omegas who held ancient power. Leighton had thought they were just fairy tales. She climbed the porch steps, each board creaking under her weight. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a sound like a sigh. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of light, but beneath the must of time, Leighton smelled lavender and sage, her grandmother's scent preserved like a ghost. The furniture was simple, a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair with faded cushions. Bookshelves lined every wall, packed with volumes whose spines had cracked with age. It was perfect. Leighton set down her duffel bag, and for the first time in 3 days she let herself cry. Not the broken sobs from the rejection ceremony, but something quieter. Grief, yes, but also relief. Here, in this forgotten place, no one expected her to be anything. No one was disappointed in her. She was just Leighton. The cabin welcomed her with its silence, And as the sun set beyond the pines, painting the clearing in shades of amber and gold, she felt something shift. Not the bond, that was gone forever, but something deeper, older, like the cabin had been waiting, like she'd finally come home. Have you ever felt like rejection was the push you needed to find where you truly belonged? Drop a comment and share your story. Sometimes the ending we fear is actually the beginning we need. Leighton woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and for 3 blissful seconds, forgot everything. Then the emptiness in her chest reminded her. The bond was gone. Dominic was gone. Her pack, her life, her purpose, all gone. She sat up in the narrow bed, her grandmother's quilt wrapped around her shoulders, and forced herself to breathe through the hollowness. The cabin was quiet except for birdsong filtering through the walls, a sound so pure and uncomplicated it made her throat ache. Keep moving. Don't think, just move. She spent the morning exploring, cataloging what her grandmother had left behind. The kitchen was stocked with canned goods decades old, glass jars of preserved something. The labels had faded to illegibility. A cast-iron skillet hung above the stove, well-seasoned and heavy as a weapon. Practical things. Survivor things. The bedroom held little, just the bed, a trunk of linens, and a wardrobe containing dresses that must have fit her grandmother 60 years ago. Leighton ran her fingers over the fabric, soft cotton and wool, and caught that lavender sage scent again. Stronger here, as if Grandma Iris had just stepped out for a walk. It was the main room that held her attention. Books everywhere, stacked on shelves, piled on the floor, tucked into corners like secrets. She pulled one down at random. Lunar cycles and their influence on wolf physiology. Another, the lost Omega lines. A third, so old the leather binding cracked under her touch. Blood magic and bond work. Her grandmother had been a simple woman, quiet, made the best blackberry pie in 3 counties, and told rambling stories that went nowhere. These books, dense, academic, some in languages Leighton didn't recognize, they didn't fit. They didn't make sense. She was returning a volume to its shelf when her elbow knocked against the stone mantel above the fireplace. The sound was wrong. Not the dull thud of elbow meeting stone, but a hollow click. Mechanical. Intentional. Leighton froze, her Omega senses suddenly screaming that something had shifted. The air pressure changed. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. A section of stones beside the fireplace swung inward, smooth, silent, as if the mechanism had been oiled yesterday. Behind it, a compartment the size of a small closet gaped open, exhaling cool air that smelled of earth and something else. Something that made her wolf stir for the first time since the rejection. Power. Her hands trembled as she reached inside. The first thing she touched was leather, a stack of journals bound in deer hide tied with cord. She pulled them out carefully, reverently, and set them on the floor. Behind them, a wooden box, simple and unadorned. And at the very back, wrapped in black silk that seemed to absorb light, an amulet. The moment her fingers brushed the silk, the amulet pulsed. Not metaphorically, literally pulsed, like a heartbeat against her palm. Leighton yanked her hand back with a gasp, but the sensation lingered, recognition, as if the thing had been waiting for her specifically. With shaking hands, she unwrapped it. The amulet was silver, or something like silver, formed in the shape of a crescent moon cradling a wolf profile. Symbols she didn't recognize etched the surface, flowing like water, almost moving in the dim light. It hung from a chain so fine it looked like spun moonlight, and it was warm. Impossible, but true. Warm as living flesh, and humming with energy that made her teeth ache. She set it aside, too much, too strange, and reached for the journals instead. The top one fell open as if it wanted to be read, pages soft with age, but the ink still dark and clear. Her grandmother's handwriting, but not the shaky script from her final years. This was strong, confident, written by a hand that knew its purpose. My dearest Leighton, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found your way home. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you these things while I lived. The magic that protects our line also binds our tongues. We cannot speak the truth until the air is ready to hear it. You are not weak, little moon. You never were. You are Lunar Omega, the last of a bloodline so ancient, most wolves have forgotten we ever existed. We are not like common Omegas. We are the balance, the bridge between wolf and magic, between pack and land. Our power sleeps until awakened by great loss, by the severing of false bonds, by the absolute destruction of who we thought we were. Your rejection was not a failure, it was a baptism. The bond you lost was never truly yours. It was a cage you didn't know you were in. Now you are free to become what you were always meant to be, if you have the courage to accept it. Leighton's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing herself to keep reading. The amulet is your birthright. It holds the accumulated power of every Lunar Omega who came before you. Our strength, our knowledge, our magic. It will recognize you because you are of my blood, of our blood, going back 1,000 generations. But power means nothing without choice, Leighton. You can walk away. Live as a lone wolf, unbonded and free. No one would blame you. Or you can become what you were born to be. The instructions are in these journals. The rituals, the history. Everything I couldn't tell you when I was alive, bound by the old laws. It's yours now. All of it. You were never too weak, my darling girl. You were too strong for the life they tried to force you into. Welcome home, Grandma Iris P.S. The cabin is warded, safe. Nothing can harm you here unless you invite it in. Rest, heal. And when you're ready, read the second journal. That's when things get interesting. Leighton sat back on her heels, the journal clutched to her chest, and felt something crack open inside her. Not breaking, opening. Like a door she hadn't known existed suddenly swinging wide. Lunar Omega. The words should have sounded impossible, ridiculous, but they resonated in her bones like a bell finally rung after centuries of silence. She looked at the amulet again. It pulsed steadily now. Patient. Waiting. Outside the forest had gone quiet. Not the silence of absence, but of attention. As if every tree, every creature, every breath of wind had turned to witness this moment. Leighton reached for the amulet with trembling fingers. The moment the chain settled around her neck, the world ignited. Power slammed through her, not painful, but overwhelming. Her vision whited out. She felt her grandmother's presence, and her grandmother's grandmother, and a chain of women stretching back into time immemorial. Strength, knowledge, magic that tasted like moonlight and smelled like wild sage. And beneath it all, a certainty she'd never felt in her entire life. This was who she was meant to be. Not Dominic's failed mate, not the pack's disappointment. This ancient, wild, impossible thing. When her vision cleared, Leighton was on her hands and knees, gasping, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. The emptiness where her bond had been was still there, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like space. Room to grow into something new. She grabbed the second journal with shaking hands and opened it to the first page. Congratulations, little moon. Now the real work begins. The journals consumed her. For 3 days, Leighton barely left the cabin. She read until her eyes burned, until the words blurred together, until she dreamed in her grandmother's handwriting. Each page was a revelation, stripping away everything she'd been taught about Omegas, about weakness, about her place in the world. Lunar Omegas weren't submissive. They were sovereign. They didn't just bear children. They could bless entire bloodlines or curse them into extinction. They didn't follow alphas. They chose alphas. And that choice was binding as fate itself. The old packs had revered them, built temples in their honor, understood that true power wasn't in dominance, but in balance. Then the purge came. 300 years ago, a coalition of alphas, terrified of Omega power they couldn't control, had hunted the lunar lines to near extinction. They'd rewritten history, turned Omegas into property, into weakness, into less. Her grandmother's line had survived by hiding, by pretending to be ordinary, by letting the world forget what they truly were. Until now. Leighton stood at the cabin window, the amulet warm against her sternum, and watched the forest with new eyes. She could feel it now, the way the land breathed, the way magic moved through root and stone, like blood through veins. The wolves that came to the clearing's edge, each dusk, sitting just beyond the tree line, watching her with knowing eyes. They weren't threats, they were waiting. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home to a language she'd forgotten she spoke. On the fourth morning, she woke to voices. Not inside the cabin, outside. Male. Aggressive. The particular cadence of alphas used to being obeyed. Her wolf surged up, instinct screaming danger, but the amulet pulsed against her skin, steadying her, reminding her she wasn't helpless anymore. Leighton pulled on jeans and a sweater, tucked the amulet beneath her collar, and stepped onto the porch. 5 wolves stood at the clearing's edge. Their human forms were tense, coiled, radiating that specific alpha arrogance that made her stomach clench with old fear. But behind the fear, something new stirred. Anger. These were her lands now, her sanctuary. They had no right. Leighton Fleming. The speaker was broad-shouldered, his hair gray at the temples, his eyes calculating. "You're a difficult woman to find." She said nothing, just watched, waited. "I'm Marcus Thorne, Alpha of the Iron Ridge Pack. Your former pack's neighbor." His smile was all teeth. "We've been monitoring this territory for months. Unclaimed land is rare these days. Imagine our surprise when we caught your scent." "This land isn't unclaimed," Leighton said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "It's mine, inherited, legal." "Legal," Marcus laughed, and his wolves joined in, a chorus of mockery that set her teeth on edge. "A packless Omega thinks she can hold territory? That's adorable." One of his wolves stepped forward, younger, cockier. "We heard what happened. Dominic Blackthorne finally got smart and dumped the defective Omega. Can't even carry a pup to term, and now you think you can—" The forest moved, not metaphorically. The trees at the clearing's edge bent inward, branches creaking like warning voices. The ground beneath the wolves' feet rippled, just enough to make them stumble, to make their eyes go wide with something that looked a lot like fear. Leighton felt the amulet burning against her skin, felt power flowing through her like electricity, and realized with a start. She'd done that. Instinct. Defense. The land responding to her will. Marcus's smile vanished. "What the hell? Leave." Her voice came out doubled, layered with something ancient that made even her own wolf shiver. "These lands are warded, protected. You're not welcome here." For a moment, she thought they might attack anyway. Alphas didn't take orders from Omegas, and 5 against 1 should have been no contest. But then the wolves appeared. They materialized from the shadows like smoke given form, massive, wild, their eyes reflecting colors that didn't exist in nature. Not pack wolves, something older. Guardians of this place, perhaps, drawn by her awakening. They formed a line between Leighton and the Iron Ridge wolves, silent, unmoving, radiating menace. Marcus took a step back. This isn't over. These lands are too valuable. Then you'll have to go through me to take them. Leighton lifted her chin, feeling the weight of 1,000 grandmothers standing at her back. And I promise you, that won't end the way you think. They left, quickly, glancing over their shoulders like prey that had just realized it was outmatched. When they were gone, the guardian wolves turned to her. The largest, a silver-gray beast with eyes like molten gold, dipped its head. Not submission, acknowledgement. Then they melted back into the forest, as silently as they'd come. Leighton stood on her porch, shaking, and felt a wild laugh bubble up her throat. She'd just faced down 5 alphas. Her. The defective Omega who couldn't even keep a mate. The amulet pulsed against her skin, warm and approving. She was still riding the adrenaline high when the second visitor arrived. This one didn't announce himself with posturing. She simply felt him, a presence at the clearing's edge, patient, waiting for permission. Different from the Iron Ridge wolves. This felt like recognition. Leighton turned. The man who stepped into the clearing was tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the fluid grace of a wolf entirely comfortable in his skin, but there was no aggression in his posture, just curiosity and something else. Reverence. "Lunar Omega," he said, his voice low, rough with emotion. "I felt your awakening 3 days ago, felt it like lightning in my blood." Leighton's hand went instinctively to the amulet. "Who are you?" "Ash Kincaid." He took another step closer, then stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. The wards, she realized. He couldn't enter without invitation. I've been waiting a long time. My grandmother told me stories. She said one day, a lunar Omega would rise again, and when she did, the old ways would return. Your grandmother knew mine? His smile was sad, beautiful. In another life, perhaps. I'm a lone wolf, have been for 20 years. I left my pack when they tried to force me to take a mate I didn't choose. His eyes met hers, and the intensity there made her breath catch. The old stories say lunar Omegas don't just choose mates. They call them true mates. Not political bonds or convenience, real connection. Leighton's heart hammered. Why are you telling me this? Because, Ash said softly, I've been hearing your call since the moment you put on that amulet. Before she could respond, before she could process what that meant, a third scent hit the wind. Familiar. Devastating. Dominic. Her former mate stepped into the clearing from the opposite side, flanked by 2 of his beta wolves. He looked exactly as she remembered. Commanding, beautiful, cold as winter stone. But now she could see what she'd missed before. The insecurity beneath the arrogance, the fear. Leighton. Her name in his mouth sounded like ownership. We need to talk. No, she said simply. We don't. The Iron Ridge Pack is mobilizing. They're going to challenge Shadow Moon for territorial rights, and we... He stopped, his eyes landing on Ash. His expression darkened. Who the hell is this? Ash didn't even look at him. His attention stayed fixed on Leighton, waiting. This is my land, Leighton said, feeling power thrumming through her veins, ancient and sure. And you have exactly 10 seconds to leave before I show you what a weak Omega can really do. Dominic's face went through shock, disbelief, and finally, buried deep, fear. Good. You need us, he tried. You're alone out here. Unprotected, the guardian wolves emerged from the trees again, surrounding Leighton in a loose circle. The message was clear. She was anything but alone. What would you do if you discovered your greatest weakness was actually your hidden strength all along? Comment below. Sometimes the power we need has been inside us the whole time, just waiting for us to be brave enough to claim it. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Dominic made his mistake. He stepped forward, crossing the ward line without permission, and the land screamed. Not sound. Sensation. Every living thing in the clearing felt it, a rejection so visceral it dropped the beta wolves to their knees. Dominic stumbled, his face going gray, his hand clutching his chest where their bond used to be. Stop! Leighton's command cracked through the air, and the pressure released. She hadn't meant to do it. The power had moved through her like instinct, protecting what was hers. Dominic gasped, staring at her with something between horror and awe. What are you? What I always was, she said quietly. You just never bothered to look. Behind him, the forest exploded with movement. The Iron Ridge pack poured into the clearing, not 5 wolves this time, but 20. Marcus Thorne at their head, his eyes wild with greed and desperation. They'd been waiting, watching, and they'd seen everything. A lunar Omega, Marcus breathed, his gaze locked on the amulet at her throat. The legends are true. That amulet alone is worth dying for? Ash moved, placing himself between Leighton and the advancing wolves. His voice was silk over steel. Because that's what you'll do if you touch her. One lone wolf against my pack? Marcus laughed. Even a lunar Omega can't. She won't be alone. Dominic's voice cut through the chaos. He stepped beside Ash, his wolves flanking him, facing the Iron Ridge pack. His eyes met Leighton's, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw genuine remorse. I was wrong, about everything, but I won't let them take you. The clearing held its breath. Leighton felt the weight of the moment pressing down. This was the choice her grandmother had written about. The crossroads. She could let the males fight for her, fall back into the old pattern of being protected, possessed, owned. Or she could become what she was born to be. She stepped forward past both Dominic and Ash, into the space between the 2 packs. Enough. The word rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. Every wolf froze. Leighton closed her eyes and reached for the power she'd been studying, the ritual her grandmother had marked in the 2nd journal. The claiming. Not of land, not of pack, of self. The amulet blazed white-hot against her skin. She spoke the words in a language older than pack politics, older than alpha dominance, older than fear. Her grandmother's voice joined hers, and her grandmother's grandmother, and all the lunar Omegas who'd come before, their power flowing through her like moonlight made solid. The earth answered. Light erupted from where she stood, silver and gold, and colors that didn't have names. It spread across the clearing in waves, and where it touched, wolves dropped to their knees, not in pain, in recognition. Their wolves knew what their human minds had forgotten. This was ancient power, sacred power, the kind you didn't fight. You bowed. When the light faded, Leighton stood at the center of a new reality. The clearing had transformed. Symbols glowed in the earth, wards so powerful she could taste them. The guardian wolves had multiplied, their eyes fixed on the Iron Ridge wolves with predatory patience. Marcus Thorne was on his knees, his arrogance shattered. Please, he whispered. We didn't know. Now you do. Leighton's voice was her own, but amplified with the weight of her lineage. These lands are claimed, not by conquest, by birthright, by blood and magic and choice. She turned slowly, meeting every eye. Anyone who enters with ill intent will face not just me, but every Lunar Omega who came before me. The Iron Ridge wolves fled. Dominic remained kneeling, his head bowed. Leighton, go home, Dominic. She said it without anger, just finality. You severed our bond. You set me free. For that, I'm grateful. But we're done. He looked up, tears tracking down his face. The great Alpha, reduced to what he'd always been. Just a man who'd made the wrong choice. I'm sorry. I know. And she did. She could feel his regret like a living thing. But sorry doesn't make you my mate. It never did. He left, his wolves following, and for the first time in weeks, Leighton felt the bond's absence not as loss, but as liberation. Only Ash remained. He rose slowly, his storm-gray eyes meeting hers, with something that made her breath catch. Not worship, not possession, recognition. You called, he said softly, and I answered. But the choice is still yours, Lunar Omega. It always will be. 3 months later, the cabin wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was a sanctuary. Leighton stood on the newly reinforced porch, watching the sun rise over her land, and it was hers now, in every way that mattered. The wards hummed contentedly, strong as iron, welcoming as home. The clearing had expanded, making room for the 3 additional cabins they'd built. Because she wasn't alone anymore. The rejected wolves had found her, one by one. A beta female, cast out for challenging her alpha's cruelty. An omega male deemed too soft by his pack. A young alpha who'd refused an arranged mating. They'd heard whispers of a lunar omega who offered sanctuary, who judged wolves not by their rank, but by their hearts. They'd come, and she'd welcome them. Morning, boss! Kira, the beta female, emerged from the nearest cabin, 2 steaming mugs in hand. She'd appointed herself Leighton's second-in-command without asking, and honestly, Leighton was grateful for it. We're not doing boss, Leighton said, accepting the coffee. Fine. Morning. Lunar Omega who saves broken wolves and pretends she doesn't love being called boss. Leighton laughed. The sound still surprised her sometimes. 3 months ago, she'd thought she'd never laugh again. Movement at the tree line caught her eye. Ash emerged from his morning patrol, shifting mid-stride from wolf to man with the kind of grace that still made her pulse skip. He'd stayed, not as her guard or her possession, but as her choice. They'd taken it slow, learned each other, built something real on foundation of respect rather than convenience. And last week, under the full moon, they'd chosen each other. A true mate bond, not forced, not political, but right. It felt nothing like the bond with Dominic. That had been a chain. This was wings. Borders are quiet, Ash reported, climbing the porch steps. His hand found hers automatically, their fingers intertwining. Though I think the Iron Ridge pack is still watching from a distance. Let them watch, Leighton said. They'll learn eventually. She'd made it clear, this sanctuary wasn't a threat to other packs. She didn't want conquest or power plays. She wanted safety for wolves who didn't fit the mold, who'd been broken by systems that valued dominance over compassion. Word was spreading. Just last week, a mother had brought her teenage son, an Omega boy being pressured to mate an alpha twice his age. Leighton had given them shelter, protection, and time to figure out their next move. This was her purpose, not breeding, not submission. This, building a place where worth wasn't measured by rank or fertility, but by the content of one's character. Leighton, Ash's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You okay? She turned to him, this male who'd waited lifetimes for her, who saw her power and didn't flinch, who loved her strength instead of fearing it. I'm perfect, she said, and meant it. The sun crested the mountains, spilling gold across the clearing. The guardian wolves emerged from the forest for their morning check-in, their ancient eyes approving. Inside the cabins, her small pack was waking, 8 wolves who'd found family in rejection, who understood that being cast out wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Dominic had sent a letter last month, an apology, genuine and thorough, an invitation to meet, to talk, to perhaps build an alliance between his pack and her sanctuary. She'd considered it, might even accept eventually, but on her terms, as an equal, as what she'd always been meant to be. The amulet warmed against her skin, her grandmother's final gift, her bloodline's legacy. But the real inheritance wasn't the power or the magic. It was the knowledge that she'd never been broken. Just becoming. Kira called from inside that breakfast was ready. More wolves were arriving this afternoon, a pair of siblings fleeing an abusive pack. There were wards to reinforce, supplies to gather, a whole life to build from the ashes of her old one. Leighton squeezed Ash's hand and smiled. Come on, she said. We've got work to do. They walked inside together, into the warmth and laughter and blessed chaos of chosen family. Behind them, the forest whispered approval, the land sang with magic, and the rejected Omega who'd inherited her grandmother's cabin, who'd found not just a secret, but herself, finally understood what belonging truly meant. It wasn't about being accepted by others. It was about accepting yourself and building a home where others could do the same. Leighton's rejection became her greatest gift. It freed her to discover who she really was. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the universe pushing you toward your true beginning. Now I need your help to keep sharing stories like this one. If Leighton's journey moved you, here's what you can do. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another emotional story like this video if you believe rejection can lead to redemption. Comment below. What would you do if you discovered hidden power within yourself? Have you ever had a rejection that turned into your greatest blessing? Share this story with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Your support helps us create more stories about broken people finding their strength. Every subscription, every like, every comment tells us you want more. So do me this favor, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and become part of our community. Because just like Leighton built her sanctuary, we're building something special here together. What story should we tell next? Drop your ideas in the comments.